3 years ago, I went to sell a whole bunch of my physical gold and silver, realizing it was no longer the best investment, for me at least. And yeah, I know you're not supposed to call it an investment, it's insurance or preservation of wealth or whatever else you're calling it. But for me, I learned a whole bunch in that process of trying to offload a whole bunch of physical metals. Specifically, a lot to do with the industry and how it works, because when I went to sell this particular bar of silver, I was offered 15% less than spot value for it. And you're not going to believe why. I'll tell you at the end of the video. But I want to get into a little bit of why I don't necessarily think physical gold and silver is the best investment for me, and why it's probably not the best investment for you either, at least not in the way that you're being told to do it. Because there's a lot of people out there that are telling you you should be buying a whole bunch of physical gold and silver because, hey, the economy may collapse, the US dollar may collapse, and you need to have it in case you need to buy things like toilet paper or food or other things when cash becomes something that just isn't valuable anymore. But before I get into all the details, do me a quick favor. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and please hit the like button so more people like you can see this video. And by the way, I am going to acknowledge that a little bit of my thought process has changed on physical gold and silver. So if you're a past viewer and you're watching this and you're going, oh, this is different than last time, that's because it is a little bit different than that last time. But let me start by talking about how I got into this whole physical gold and silver thing. Just like you probably did, you found a guru, you found an expert that told you needed to have this sort of investment. And that was the same for me. I had subscribed in 2011, 2012 to an investment newsletter, and it was a value investing newsletter, the type of investing that Warren Buffett does. And that newsletter made me a ton of money. I bought and sold a lot of the recommended stocks and did quite well. But one of the things that they recommended was that you buy physical gold and silver and add it to your portfolio. And this is definitely something that I'm a big believer of. In fact, I still hold a pretty significant amount of my portfolio, about 5 to 10% of it, in silver and gold. Just not physically anymore, and there's a few reasons why, and I'll get to that in a second. But this newsletter basically said you had to have this for all the reasons you've probably been told: devaluation of the currency, economic collapse, blah, 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 blah. But what was interesting was when I went through the process of buying all this physical silver and gold and stacking, I went to the local experts. I bought a whole bunch of metals from them, and I trusted them. I was not only a customer, I was a good customer. I was buying a lot of physical metals. And it just happened that this was the very first physical metal that I'd ever bought from the dealer that I started to build a relationship with. And I guess you could say he saw me coming. He knew I was brand new to investing, buying, hoarding, stacking, whatever you want to call it, and he pretty much took advantage of me. He sold me the bar that he didn't want to have in stock. Now, when I bought this bar, it was the only bar I bought. I bought one item at a time, and I think for the most part, he just thought I was never coming back. But as time went on, I started to buy more and more, my stack got bigger, and in 2020, just after the pandemic, I realized that this was not the best investment for me. The main reason why was I started to take a look at the difference between the spot price and the buy and the sell price that the dealers were offering. And what I realized was that the primary reason to have this physical gold and silver was as an inflation hedge. But when I looked at the difference between buy and sell prices, what I realized was that as soon as I bought any of this precious metal, well, it immediately lost 5% of its value right out of the gate. So while I was trying to protect myself against 3, 4, 5% inflation, I was losing 5% the day that I took it out of the store. It was literally the same as driving a car off the lot. And the reason why is because of the significant spread between the buy price and the sell price that dealers are willing to sell physical gold and silver at. And depending on the level of inflation at any given time, this meant that I was basically 1 to 2 years behind the minute I bought the product. Now, as somebody who studied economics in university, I quickly realized that this was probably not the best way to be adding gold and silver to my portfolio. So I started to look at other options and realized that there was far better ways to hold it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who say that if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And yeah, I guess they're kind of right. If there were ever an economic catastrophe and you didn't hold the physical gold and silver, there is a chance that you may not be able to get your value back out of it. But for me, gold and silver was never about having something that I could use to trade and barter for goods. It was always about diversifying my portfolio, and really that was all that there was to it. I know personally, if there ever was hyperinflation, there's a whole bunch of other things that I can do that would get me far better results than holding a few metal bars. Things like having a 3 to 6 month supply of non-perishable food and the ability to hunt and go out and get my own food are far more valuable in my mind than having precious metals. So while having the shiny stuff around just in case might be a good idea for some, for me, it just wasn't something that I'm concerned about. And over the long term, if you don't cherry pick the dates, you genuinely look at the long term value of precious metals, and you also realize that you're taking a pretty big hit the minute that you buy the product, well, then it becomes pretty clear that this is not just not a good investment, but combined with the fact that there's other things you can do in order to protect yourself in scenarios where the economy goes to hell in a handbasket, well, it just didn't make sense, and in my mind, it doesn't. Now, that being said, my views have kind of changed on this. I still keep a little bit of precious metals around. A little bit of gold, a little bit of silver. Okay, that's probably a lot more silver than I actually need, but I do keep this around just in case. In addition to that, though, I also keep some other currencies around. Because what physical gold and silver gurus and salespeople don't tell you is that when a currency collapses, it isn't gold and silver that most people flock to immediately. It's other currencies, typically currencies that are readily available from regions around the area where the currency has collapsed. Take Venezuela, for example. Yes, there was a small area of the country that used gold as a means of barter. However, the majority of the country switched to other currencies of nearby countries and the United States dollars. So if I'm concerned about my currency collapsing, the best thing I can actually do is to get a whole bunch of currencies from other countries to make sure that I've got a little bit of money that I can use for trade, because more than likely that is going to be accepted before physical gold, physical silver, and other precious metals. It's just the way the world works, no matter what the guys on the other side of the counter tell you. And that being said, one of the other things that the physical gold and silver gurus don't tell you as well is that you should only have a small portion of your portfolio in physical gold and silver. Even Peter Schiff, the poster boy for owning gold, says you should only have 10 to 20% of your portfolio in that asset. So these people who have all of their money invested in physical gold and silver are absolutely crazy. That's far too much. They need to be invested in other things, because over the long term, precious metals tend to perform pretty much only at the rate of inflation. Yes, there are some dates you can cherry pick going back to the year 2000 that make it look like gold is a superior investment to pretty much everything else, but everything typically returns to the mean. And if you go back and you look at the long-term history of physical gold and silver, you will find that over the long term, it isn't an asset that outperforms. And there's one last thing you really need to know about the physical gold and silver industry. It is a finicky and pretty much unregulated industry. And when you're buying physical gold and silver from a dealer, there's nothing that prevents them from taking advantage of you. They can pretty much set their premiums at whatever they want. They can buy back at whatever price they want, and they don't have to buy back your silver and gold. It turns out that the dealer who sold me this bar didn't want to give me full value for it merely because he just didn't want the bar. Now, I don't know if that's because he didn't like NTR as a brand. I don't know if it's because he didn't actually have the money in order to be able to purchase it from me. I don't know what his reason was. But for some reason that day, even though he had sold me this bar that he thought was worth less than what a Sunshine Mint bar would be worth, he just didn't want to buy this. So he offered me a really ridiculous price, hoping that I wouldn't take it. And I didn't. And knowing that I couldn't trust him anymore, I also didn't sell him any of my other physical gold and silver either. So while this was really a case of buyer beware, and I wasn't aware, outside of owning a couple pieces here and there just in case you need them, this is not something that you should be putting a lot of your money into. And it's definitely not something that you should be putting your life savings into. Oh, and if you want to see a whole bunch of other videos on why you shouldn't own physical gold and silver, where I get into more technical details, make sure you check out this video here or one of the others on my channel.